This is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom show, The Wake Up Call on WCOM LP, Chapel Hill and Carborough, 103.5 on your FM dial, or live streaming at WCOMFM.org. You can also watch the show on the People's Channel after a week's delay on Thursday night at 10 p.m., Friday morning at 6 a.m., or Tuesday at noon. I'm Iris Schwinzer here with our host, Lori Hoyt, and Emily O'Hare on the camera. Today our special guest is Nancy Milio.
Welcome, Nancy. Nancy Milio is somebody I've known of for a long time, not really known well, but she has a very strong reputation for her knowledge of current affairs and I've been told brilliant analysis of the political and cultural situations in our country. So we're very glad to have Nancy with us today. And on this cold Wednesday, we're here again in downtown Carborough, and very happy to be here, very appreciative to this station for this opportunity. Before I get started talking with Nancy, I just want to mention, talking about how cold it is today, that several of our sisters, the Raging Grannies, are doing a 14-hour fast outside in Raleigh at the Bicentennial Mall in support of because of wanting to be in solidarity with the starving children in Yemen, that the media does not pay very much attention to. So to call attention and to get people showing their concern, I hope that everybody will call their representatives, call our senators. Right now, there seems to be a possible opening in terms of our relationship with Saudi Arabia, that maybe we might change course. But anyhow, I guess we'll be talking about some of that with Nancy. But I just wanted to send out a salute to our sisters and hope that they are finding a way to keep warm. It's 14 hours in the cold, and our hearts go out to them in our prayers. So, that said, welcome again to Nancy Milio. And Nancy, I think you've been a staunch member of the Friends Meeting House here in Chapel Hill for many years.
About 18 years, yeah.
18 years?
Yes, and I worked with the Friends Committee on National Legislation in Washington for that length of time as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that. No wonder.
Yeah.
That's I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that organization, or we'll get right to the chase.
Well, it's, no, I will. I was many years heading the policy committee, which lays out the priorities with input from the Quaker meetings across the country for the staff of FCNL to base their lobbying strategy on for each new Congress. So we're deciding on the priorities, and as a matter of fact, the end of the week, for the Congress that begins in January. It's quite a large staff now, something like 45 people.
Wow.
And is the largest peace lobby in Washington, and has a reputation for integrity, working both sides of the aisle, trying to bring sides together, trying to find common ground, just to move things in the direction of peace and justice.
Wow. So I didn't know that you worked with them. That's wonderful. They also have a terrific reputation. You're right, for integrity and being so knowledgeable and having such the clarity of their information, and you just know it's information you can trust. and especially these days with the cancer of fake news that we seem to be facing, it's particularly wonderful to have sources that have that integrity that one can go to get one's information. Yeah. So So you've been working with them for since you've been down here then for the 18 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I had used their materials before when I was teaching and in other talks that I've given. It's one source of, as you suggest, one source of information that is reliable.
Yeah. So how long have you lived here in Chapel Hill, Carrboro?
Like forever, about 40 years.
Oh, so you.
Yeah. I came in 76.
Well, I've been here forever too. I came first to Durham in 70. I came in the 60s to Durham, but I got over to Chapel Hill in 74. Yeah, so we've both been around a while, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where were you before you came here?
I was in Boston.
In Boston?
And I was born in Detroit, though.
Wow, that's a city with another interesting history.
Yeah, it's a great town, really.
Yeah. So what's happening in our poor old world?
Well, I hear that a lot. I don't know how many people have told me, they don't listen to the news anymore because they get depressed, etc. And see, I don't feel that way. I think there's a lot of good things happening, and I'd like to try to find those good things and talk about them. And especially now, I think we're in a much better place than we were 10 days ago.
Prior to the election, yeah.
But even so, yes. No, but I think the what I see as the most important problem of the many, many problems I could name is that we need to strengthen our democracy. I think, I didn't want to use that language at first, wait to see what happened, and more there was reason to wonder what direction are we going in and how long is this going to last and is it repairable. I think Mr. Trump has done a good job of weakening and misshaping our democratic institutions. In the beginning, the bureaucracy itself, which he has control over by defunding it and understaffing the organizations, like especially the State Department, which should be the lead agency in our relations to the rest of the world, but it's not. The military is. He has taken science away from decision making. Everything from replacing the scientific advisory committees in many agencies with industry representatives, and to the point of naming the head of NASA, which has all kinds of stuff to do with climate change, with a climate denier. And you can go on about that. And he's changed the regulatory agencies so that they're deregulatory agencies, and named lobbyists from industry to head them. And then, EPA is of course the premier example, but many others are in that category as well. And finally, one of the most damaging things that doesn't seem like it's damaging on the surface is this open disdain for the law, calling out other political leaders, calling the press the enemy of the people, siding with plaintiffs in the Justice Department against affirmative action, against reproductive rights, against LGBT rights, against voting rights, and moving us out of international treaties, you know, the Paris Climate Accord, so many of them, TPP, NAFTA, the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice, so on. And finally, most recently, this thing of calling out the judge who, and saying he was an Obama judge that stopped the separation of immigrant kids from parents, so that Justice Roberts had to reprimand him.
Which was amazing.
Extraordinary, yes. And Justice Roberts is very, very conservative, but maybe his desire to preserve the Supreme Court and not to let it go down in flames on his watch gave him the courage to do that.
Yes.
And maybe we can hope for other courageous decisions in the future.
Yes.
One of the things that Mr. Trump has done is to bypass the circuit court in challenging plaintiffs who have opposed some of his actions. Most recently, his ban on trans people in the military. It was struck down by the district court, and so instead of waiting to go through the circuit court, he's taking it to the Supreme Court. And so that messes up the whole federal judicial process. And you do that even a few times, you set a precedent. And that is another way of degrading democratic institutions. I think in his notion of America First, what he's really saying is that American sovereignty and self-interest is above everything else in the world, including international law, international treaties, international relations, and looking at it in such a narrow sense that we're losing, if we have not already lost, the trust of our allies and embolden our adversaries. And he doesn't seem to realize that the glue that holds countries together is not specific transactional deals. It's trust, it's reliability, so that when things happen that are unpredictable, you know you can count on your allies, even if you haven't signed on the dotted line that they will agree to do this, that, and the other. He doesn't work that way. And, that may be okay if he wants to run his businesses that way, even though he wasn't a very good businessman and lost a lot of money, is in a lot of debt and all the rest of it. It's no way to run a country, for sure. Even with that, I think we can take heart that in almost every one of these things that I'm mentioning, he has been challenged in the court. And many of those challenges are ongoing. He has lost some of them, as I said. And part of the reason they've lost is like they don't know how to conduct a trial proceeding. Their cases have been struck down because they didn't do their homework. I mean, essentially, they didn't know what they were talking about because they just thought, we can just sign on the dotted line, we're going to change this. And the court said, no, you have to give a legal rationale. You have to follow the law. You have to understand congressional intent. And you can't do irreparable harm to people by your decisions. So supposedly they go back and they try again, but we'll see. Now it's one thing to rely on the courts for some of these issues, as a kind of a last resort. But we know that the courts, under this administration, will become increasingly conservative.
That's
So,
very scary.
yeah, it is. And for two reasons. One, because since the Congress lacks the courage to pass legislation that's definitive, then it's up to the courts to try to figure out what words mean in legislation, and it gives the bureaucracy broad discretion to do this. And so it's going to be brought to the court, and they are, in effect, almost writing law, which is not good. That's not what democracy is about.
No, because that's part of our democracy is the separation of powers, and if one major branch doesn't use its powers, it's putting too much on the court. It's weakening the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like a three-legged stool.
Yeah.
You pull one of the legs out, and Congress has been so ineffectual.
But, so the answer is, it's twofold answer. One, you don't go to the federal court, you go to the state courts instead. And that has been done. It's certainly being done in litigating against Mr. Trump himself in New York. And just a couple days ago, the court said that the state attorney general did have standing to prosecute, at least investigate and prosecute the Trump Foundation for the way it's used the so-called charitable funds in the foundation. The charges are that he used it for political purposes and for personal purposes and so on. And there are many cases against him and or his family. And we'll see the unfolding of that in months to come, and maybe years.
So that's one hopeful thing we can.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
And the other thing, of course, is to change the Congress so that it will legislate, it will do its job. And of course, we had some, what many of us consider to be happy news on the 6th and in days following. So the Democrats now have 38 new seats in the House, and maybe they'll have one more. I like to think, and I do believe, that the new crop of Democrats looks wonderfully like America, and the America we aspire to. And I think that these people, younger and energetic and full of ideas and wanting to work, are going to invigorate the House, even with, or not even with, but with the help of the wisdom and experience of Nancy Pelosi, who just was nominated with 203 of her caucus votes. And will be.
Did it go through?
It did, yes. 203. She needs 218 next week, but it's possible that the Democrats who didn't vote for her, I think my guess is they just abstained, did that because they promised their constituents that that's what they would do, so they did it. And now they can vote for her on the floor, because the alternative would be to have Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House, who is, of course, a very hardline, right-wing Republican. So I don't think their constituents would be too happy about that. So I think they will vote with the Democrats, with the rest of the Democrats. But she has done a great job in, it wasn't like a fight to get these votes. She did it strategically, in such a way that she'll be able to work with them, use their strengths, and bring the caucus together. She promised each one some of what they wanted, from shaping the agenda that they'll start with in January. For instance, Ayanna Presley, the African-American from Massachusetts, was very big on gun control. And so she promised her that there would be a vote on universal background check legislation early in the term. And she put her on the gun control task force to turn out more gun control legislation. She talked with Talib, the Muslim woman from Detroit, I should note that, who wanted to make sure that the people on the special climate change committee that Nancy Pelosi is reinstituting, that all of the members be people who did not receive corporate candidate finance monies.
Good.
So they would not be, in hoc to the corporations
Yeah.
as far as climate change is concerned. And she went down the list and doing the same thing. I think one of the best things is that Barbara Lee, who was the African American woman who had the guts way back in 2001 to vote against the Iraq War.
The only
person.
one. The only one.
Yes, she's been part of the Black Caucus for all these years, and she wants to be the head of the whole Democratic caucus, and I think she'll get it.
Great. She has hung in there, and she's a smart lady because she's managed to be reelected and, hold her own with her constituents and still talk about integrity, still have
Right.
unusual integrity, and God bless her, yeah.
Yeah. And the Black Caucus is now at its greatest power ever. It will now, because of seniority, chair 5 major committees
Oh, wow.
in the House, including finance, education, and oversight. And what's her name? Barbara Waters. Maxine Waters is chair of finance, and so you can imagine what fun that's going to be for Mr. Trump.
Oh, I didn't know that at all. That is,
and plus chairs of 12 subcommittees. So
Wow.
they're going to have an impact, along with all the new
Yeah.
folks coming in, who are people of color and Native Americans. There'll be 4 Native Americans in that
before I
house.
knew about you, that means so much to all of us, but I know that's something I really care about tremendously.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I just feel they're the water protectors, the planet protectors, they've been out there in the Dakotas, they've been out there for centuries trying to protect the land.
Well, and you'll be happy to know that the courts said that stop the Keystone XL pipeline now.
Yes, let's hope that.
No, it's been stopped.
Oh, it is stuff.
Yeah, the court stopped it.
Okay. No ifs, ands, and buts, huh?
Right, yes, yes. So the environmentalists will be very happy. Another thing that happened was that that 24 candidates that the NRA sponsored lost.
You're kidding.
And the gun control people outspent the NRA on their candidates, and they got 88 in that they sponsored. So that's all to the good.
Oh, that all 24 lost?
Yeah.
I'd not heard that anyway. Thank goodness you came. You are cheering me up.
Well, that's why I feel like I do.
Yeah, yeah.
But it wasn't just November 6th. This
No.
was coming from the first Women's March after the inauguration, and it built from there to the teachers' marches across the country,
Yes.
to the young people marching, the March for Our Lives. The unions have revived. There are new unions being formed, even though we heard about GM, which means 14,000 workers that aren't in the union. And there are new Native American groups that are putting candidates forward, training them, women's rights groups. Planned Parenthood has become very political in trying to preserve reproductive rights in the courts and with candidates. So there's a whole infrastructure of new infrastructure to, and it's not going to, I mean, it's not over. It's going to continue for the next 2 years and beyond. Finding candidates, training them. There are now at least 40 women who have been campaign managers of other women's candidacies who have gathered this experience, made the connections, the networks, know the donors. Everything's in place to build now on this infrastructure, even for the people who lost. And we have heroines like Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, who had the courage to vote against Kavanaugh and lost, but she mobilized her people. They're ready to be stronger in the next election, and then I don't think she's going to go away either.
And I think that's such an important point. None of this happened by magic or wishing or stomping up and down in your living room and gnashing your teeth. I mean, it's taken hard work for a long time, and people really getting together with the smarts and sharing ideas and working their tails off to get this to happen at all. We're going to take a break. I'm getting a signal from here. It's going to do a station break.
This is Will's Wake Up Call on WCOMLP, Chapelville and Carver, 103.5 FM. You can stream us live at WCOMFM.org.
Thank you, Iris. And I just want to mention one other time, too, about the our sisters, the Raging Grannies, who are on a 14-hour fast in support or to showing concern for the children in Yemen who are starving. Been under, I don't know how many years, a minimum of 4 years of war, longer than that, I think. And they're doing that out in the cold on a day like this. So hope we're all sending prayers and love to them. Just want to honor them by us being aware of what they're doing. And so we are so delighted to have Nancy Milio with us tonight in our WILPF radio show, and she's giving us some really important information. We've all gotten through the election, and she's giving us an analysis of what's happened, much of which with this election is really, really positive. And so for those who, like myself, who get discouraged and want to throw up your hands, this is, don't give up, but keep resisting, keep up the good work, because we're beginning to see some results, but it took a lot of work to get there. So Nancy, I'm glad you're here. So I've had some of the good news. Any more good news?
Well, I think so. If you look at some of the referenda that won at the election, we find gun control measures, environmental measures, gay rights measures, affordable housing, many issues that we would like to see brought forward. One, not every single one, but many.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing to note also is that some of these new Democrats won in spite of the establishment.
What, say it again?
They won in spite of the establishment of the
Mhm.
Democratic Party, either nationally or in their state. Now, not all of them, but a few bucked the party which would not support them in favor of the incumbent Democrat, and yet they won. And I hope that people in the party are aware of this. I think they must be, and that they learned a lesson, you know, to look more broadly for candidates and not just stay with what you have, make them all compete.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I'm so glad that you said that, because I think so many of us have been so disappointed and so discouraged with the directions the party has taken in recent years. And it's, you know, sticking up too much for the elite classes itself and sort of losing what had been its mission, starting with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, you know, to be there for the working guy, to be there for more equality. It's never been perfect, but instead of building on gains, they've been losing and letting that happen. And, you know, they stopped talking about the poor. They kept talking about the middle class, you know, and I think their attention was more and more to the people with money, and I think it's to their detriment. And when it gets to the point where they've lost so many state houses and so many governorships, and I think the handwriting was on the wall, and thank goodness enough people are coming along and showing them that there's another way to do things. Bernie, thank goodness for Bernie. You know, he started saying you can raise money. People are hungry for that message. What, you know, the welfare of the people, not the corporate welfare. And yeah, so it's and I'm sure that message is getting through.
Yes, I think so. And
I hope anyhow.
just the fact that that we won, we won some governorships
Yes.
and some state houses will help in the next redistricting. Which brings us to the other question that's before the Supreme Court now, and it will be really interesting what they decide about this question of citizenship on in the census. And this is probably more important than most people think. You know,
I don't think a lot of people realize
that there is such a thing, and why it's important.
Yeah.
Because so we're all citizens, so we don't care. We can check it off, but that's not the point. The point is that some people won't answer the census at all, and what that means is that these are in effect poor people, people of color, and so they won't be counted. So that means the census will show a disproportionately white and better off population. That means that states will get less money than they need on the formula basis from the federal government to take care of the needs of the people who don't sign, aren't included in the census. And beyond that, it means that when the House districts are decided, this will mean the states with the greater white populations will get more House districts, and they will tend to be more rural because rural areas are more white, and that means more conservative people will get elected into the Congress for the next 10 years. And then take it one more step, and you add up these excess, I'll call them excess, House seats plus 2 senators, and you have the numbers for the Electoral College. So that means that white conservative states will have greater power in the Electoral College to elect the next president.
Yeah, it's
So it's a long chain, of issues that just nobody knows about, really. And I don't think that either Fox News or any newspapers go through that very much. And it's not exciting at all,
Yeah,
but it's very important. And so we'll see. We have a very conservative court, and it will be interesting to see how important they think one person, one vote is.
yes. This will be really a test of the court, won't it?
Yeah, it will.
It really will. And that's scary to contemplate. If the court votes the wrong way, do we have any recourse?
Yeah. If we have a courageous Congress, they can pass a law, like they should have done in the first place.
Okay.
So they can overrule a court with law, as long as the law is constitutional, which the Congress has a right to frame the rules for voting in federal elections.
Well, that's what we keep forgetting, because Congress has been so ineffectual. You look for solutions.
You don't think of them.
You don't think of Congress, but now that we
They can
have
do that.
a newer Congress,
Yeah.
that may
Yeah.
be another.
And they can improve the Voting Rights Act again.
Again,
Yes.
yes, I heard that being discussed on the radio today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can make clear about reproductive rights. They can do a lot of things.
They can do a lot of things.
And that is very important in, if not changing things, at least stopping some of the worst decisions in the Trump administration via the budget. Providing money for things that they want to move forward and cutting funds in things that are detrimental. For example, Trump has started building a factory to turn out low-yield nuclear warheads. New low-yield nuclear warheads. Now, if they were to test those warheads, that would breach the nuclear treaty. Like they're going up to the line, and he is not prone to keep treaty promises. But these low-yield weapons, they sound, well, maybe they're not so bad. No, they're really bad, because they're much more likely to be used than the big ones.
Yes, much more temptation for
yes.
those generals.
And if you were to know the system that controls nuclear weapons, you would pass out. It's so bad. I mean, it is really bad. And it's not just because Mr. Trump has his finger on the button. It might be safer if he did, because the real control is decentralized, and it's very fuzzy as to when you could use it and not use it. And with Russia being what it is, you could get these threats at any time, and it could be really a catastrophe.
And there's been some near misses in the past, way before Trump. I mean, this is a touchy, I mean, very sensitive. One little mistake, there's not much room for error.
That's exactly right. There's no
room for error.
None.
And there's been some touch and go things where something was misunderstood, think it was a missile coming, and at the last minute, and wasn't there some plane in Greensboro dropped its crashed and had its hydrogen bomb, that it just would have been one more little step and we could have incinerated most of North Carolina?
There have been many accidents.
Accidents that people, by the time they printed, it's way after the fact, so you think, oh, well, that was back then, and you don't want to think about it. but we've been on the verge of disaster for a long time.
Yes, and we have no notion of it, whatever. And it would take a president to bring that to public attention and the real threat to us,
Yes.
to our planet, to our future, in order for people to understand. I mean, it's sort of like climate change, you know. He disregarded all that, right? But the thing about that report, which they tried to bury, but I don't think will be buried, because
No, which report?
it came out last week on Black Friday, the National Climate Assessment.
Oh, yes.
Okay, that one, yes, that laid out the numbers and the deaths and the hit on the economy and world trade and national security and all of that. Even if they don't pay any attention to it, and they obviously have not, the fact that they put it out, because it was required by Congress, can be used in court when any group challenges any anti-climate change deregulation or rule. They can bring that before the court and say, here's your own report saying you're doing the wrong thing, you're going in the wrong direction. So that's all to the good.
That's all to the good. And that was 13 agencies.
Yeah,
That report
yeah.
was put together in collaboration, 13 agencies, so he can't just say, oh, this one agency, or, you know, he can't easily discount it. And another report came out today from the UN. It's the third report in the last month or two about climate change. And have you noticed that after all this silence by the media with fires, floods, rarely linking it to climate crisis or climate change, all of a sudden there's at least on PBS and some other media, there's more talk finally.
Yep.
Linking some of these things.
And Congress is putting money into this appropriations bill that's due next week for those disasters. So they're feeling the hit. And sooner or later, their own conservative people are going to say, let's do something about this because I'm sick of paying, to repair stuff after it's burned down or flooded over or whatever. You mentioned the Raging Grannies, and Yemen. And I just want to make the point that Congress is supposed to vote today on a bill to deny military aid to the Saudis because of what they're doing in Yemen and creating the crisis and killing civilians and going nowhere. And our senators have a vote. So if people want to do something besides fasting, they can call. There's both senators and say, vote for this bill.
Thank you. That was the next thing I was supposed to say when I was announcing about the grannies, is that not only to applaud them, but to call your senators about Yemen. But I knew the vote was coming up, but I didn't know it was today.
They're supposed to. Yeah.
Okay.
They were going to wait until after they heard from Mike Pompeo and Jim Mattis in closed session about Yemen, and then they were going to vote. And our senators didn't want to say how they'd vote until they heard from Pompeo.
Uh-huh.
Now, Pompeo will say, well, the Saudis are our buddies, so, they can't be perfect, so.
Well, this whole thing with Khashoggi and the brutality of the murder, I think has really opened up this whole look by the media, which has also been kind of complicit about Saudi Arabia, which has always been, not that anybody cares, but my personal list of one of the worst, most brutal countries in the world. And so that's really brought that to the forefront and has put the president on the spot, thank goodness, And he's looking really bad, saying, well, maybe they did and maybe they didn't. I mean, he's certainly not looking good. He's still not doing what he needs to do, but it's really put that up in the air, our whole relationship.
Well, he's going to be meeting Mohammed bin Salman on Saturday in Argentina.
Yes.
And we'll see how he handles him there. And one interesting thing is that Human Rights Watch has petitioned the Argentine government
To arrest him?
to investigate him for crimes against humanity in Yemen. So that will be hanging there as Trump makes friends with Mohammed bin Salman. And of course he's going to meet with Putin, and we'll see what he says about Ukraine. And he's going to meet with Xi Jinping, and we'll see what they do about this trade war that's going on that is hurting us, but just beginning to.
Yes.
And had a role in GM closing its plants, a role, not the main thing, but part of it, because part of the reason some of the cars weren't selling is because of the steel tariff that made all of their components cost more, so they had to increase the sale price. Their biggest market for sedans is in Europe and Asia, so why not build them there, and they will have to pay the cost, and they have a market that wants those cars.
Since when does this country not want a sedan? It says all they want are those big cars and pickup trucks.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, that's another story, America's taste.
America's taste will change if the price of gas went up.
Yes, which.
But you know, Trump keeps saying he wants to keep the price low, so he's asking his friend, no doubt he'll remind him on the weekend, keep the price of oil low by pumping more, when Mohammed bin Salman wants to stop pumping so much to raise the price because he needs the money, and he's not getting the amount of money he wants to change his thing in Saudi Arabia, because investors are very uncertain about him. He's too impulsive, like other people we know, and so they're not willing to make these huge investments that he's going to need if he's going to make this transformation in his country.
I'm hoping even if his government does not hold him publicly accountable, I'm hoping that his power is diminished so much, and that it's all kind of kept quiet, but that this, I'm hoping it's the beginning of the end for him, because that was such an arrogant. I mean, for one thing, it was a total insult to us that a legal resident from our country and a journalist at one of our top newspapers was so publicly, brutally killed. It wasn't even anything you could say was some accident like with the car accidents that they usually try to pull off or something. And also such a slap in the face to the Turkish government. They're furious. So it was so arrogantly, stupidly, but arrogantly done. Like we can get away with whatever because the president of the United States is in our pocket, and so what do we care? And I'm hoping that it's one of those unintended consequences that blows right back at them. I hope. I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah. So we sort of started touching with Yemen on foreign and also about the trade wars, about our foreign policy, and climate change, which I think is the whatever else happens, climate change is now moving into the forefront. And this new report came out today, a UN report, a report card for all the world, how it's meeting the targets that they had set. I don't know if you heard about that today. And that none of the countries, Canada, none of them are doing what they had promised, and it said that if we don't start holding to that by 2020, it's
Yeah, we're falling behind what the targets are.
and we're falling behind, and the time we have to make good is every time they come out with a report, it's shrinking.
Of course.
You know, where they thought they had so much time, then the scientists keep saying, oh, it's happening much faster than we thought. That's been the battle cry over the last couple of years, and now the 12 years, I think we had somebody on from NC Warren, just was it last week, and the battle cry is like, yeah, you don't start in 12 years to pull it together. You have to, by 12 years, have accomplished a lot of this, and so we have to start now. So I don't know, what do you think? Do we have a fighting chance?
Well, do we have a choice? You know, we're gonna be fighting it one way or the other. Now, we
Yeah.
either, you know, get serious now, or we'll be forced into worse circumstances and pay more, both in lives and property and money, going forward.
Exactly.
However, you know, a lot of the young people understand this much better. And a lot of the new people in Congress understand this
Yes.
much better. And I'm hoping that we will see some movement in legislation this year, regardless of what Mr. Trump does and says. And maybe they'll be able to stop some of these deregulatory moves that are allowing for oil and gas on federal lands and in ANWR in Alaska. That might be possible. But it takes leadership, and we just don't have that.
No, we don't, except I guess if enough of the people who are now in Congress, and even people who were not supportive as it starts dawning on them, maybe some of them will start realizing this is survival, not politics. It's really human survival.
And survival of their children and their
And their children
grandchildren.
and their grandchildren.
Exactly. I think that maybe this last election helped a lot of people understand that they personally can influence decisions, not just by voting,
No.
not just by voting, but by going to their Congress people, their senators, and lobbying in person.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, if you do it once, you realize they're just people,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And you can call and get an appointment.
Mm-hmm.
And you might talk with a staff person, you might be able to talk with your congressperson or your senator directly.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do it at the local office, or you could do it in Washington. But you can do it. And it doesn't have to be a big deal, and you don't go and tell them all the problems of the world. You go saying, I'm concerned about this,
Yeah.
and I want you to do
Keep it
this.
focused.
I want, very specifically focused. I want you to support this bill. That means, of course, you gotta do your homework a little bit, and you can, if you're interested in environmental things, then you get a newsletter online from an environmental organization, and they'll tell you which bills are
Mm-hmm.
pertinent right now. And you say, I would like you to sponsor this bill, and this is why, and then you ask, I would appreciate if you would let me know what you decide.
Thank you for that. Citizenship 101, Nancy.
Yeah,
We all
but
need
it's for
that.
real. It's for real.
We have about one more minute. The time kind of slipped away. We end a few minutes beforehand, just because that's how we have to do it for the TV show. Is there one last pearl of advice you want to give us? That was a goodie.
Well, I don't have any other advice except that I think we're in a good place. I think we have a lot to work with. I think we have a lot of good people to work with. And I think we must go forward just because it's the right thing to do.
Well, that's a perfect ending. Thank you so much. We're talking to Nancy Milio. I'm Lori Hoyt. Erin Schwitzer's on the board, and Emily O'Hare's doing the video. Thank you so much.